as shoot, I do not know how to make a graphic novel. My name is Jennifer Eichelberger. This channel, I want to be focused on my project that I've been working on for the last several years. This has been my passion project. This is the thing that I've always been working on, and it always kind of got put on the back burner. This is a graphic novel, and I think I just want to tell you a little bit about my graphic novel. So I came up with this idea for a story about 15 years ago. So my husband and I were pretty big fans of Harry Potter, and back when we got married, the 6th Harry Potter had just come out, and so we bought it and read it together, and it was just kind of a funny idea of if there was a kid from a magical family who was embarrassed of his family, that, didn't like magic at all. And so instead of using magic, he decided to disguise his magic as superpowers. And so that was the seed of this idea. And I kind of thought to myself, maybe I'll do like a small little comic with it, because honestly, doing a full-on graphic novel did not appeal to me. In fact, it had never appealed to me because it just seemed like such a daunting task, so much work. So I did not want to dedicate myself to it. But I started thinking about this idea and started coming up with, okay, who would the main villain be? Who would the superheroes in this world be? What would the other magical people in this world do? And I started developing his family. I started developing who the bad guys were. And at one point I realized, you know what? I've got more to this story than just a quick, small little comic, so I need to learn to write, and I'll make it a novel. And so that's what I started doing. I started reading all the books on how to write and to plot and how to have good dialogue and all. So I had done all this research and had started doing that, and even started taking classes to learn to write. Like I said, this book always got put on the back burner. This was something that I wanted to do, but I just always had other things going on. It was either having a baby, or I'd have freelance work, or I'd be lazy. So I never finished the book. I kept writing on it and kept working on it, but I never finished it. It was about 3 years ago when it suddenly hit me that I'm like, wait a second. This does need to be a graphic novel. I do need to play to my strengths. I've always been an illustrator. That's my profession. And I realized, okay, that's it. I gotta change my mind, and this is going to be a graphic novel. I do not know how to make a graphic novel. Started reading tons of graphic novels. I had read graphic novels before, but this time I was reading them with the intent of how do they make it work. So I took my prologue as a kind of experiment and just sketched it out in a graphic novel format. And I had to decide what I was going to put in, what I would take out. And it was a stepping point for me to understand how you frame a comic book. And it was a fun process, a little scary, but I did it, and I think it turned out okay. And then that had to go on hold once again because we were selling our house. And so that got shelved again for 6 months while we attempted to sell our house. After we moved, it was still on hold because then we were trying to settle into our home. But anyway, I was able to get back to it in early 2018, and I was working on taking my novel and converting it over to a graphic novel. So that's what I worked on for several months, is because it's not as easy as a one-to-one thing when you've got your novel and you need to turn it into a graphic novel. I ended up making quite a few changes because I realized in a novel you have time to work things out. In a graphic novel, everything happens so fast. And so I got it converted into a graphic novel. Well, and the other thing I realized is that with the graphic novel, I've ended up splitting my story down into smaller segments because my novel covers too much of it. So it's going to take probably 3 graphic novels to cover what I would have covered in a regular novel. So, because I'm still just going along, I do appreciate several people who I've received encouragement from and whose channels I really enjoy, that I get a lot of information from. Jason Brubaker is fantastic. Jake Parker, Walter Osler. These are people that I find inspiration from and kind of help keep me going, help keep me motivated. One thing that I've learned in doing this graphic novel is I have found that the hardest part of it is just starting. Because in the beginning I was like, well, I don't even know how I'm going to ink this. Like, what style of inking? I didn't even... Forget about the style of inking. I didn't know what style I wanted my characters in. And I've never been much of a person that just sits in the world building thing and comes up with all the costumes and all the crazy landscapes and all that. So it was this daunting thing for me. But after getting started, I feel like first it was slow, it was sluggish, I had to keep pushing and I had to keep going. But then once I got it figured out, it has become so much easier. And I've been able to move along at a much faster pace. So many of these creators that I watch on YouTube, they'll ask them, how do you get motivated? How do you get going? And I think it's just starting. It's just getting started in the first place. Also, writing your entire story before trying to do a graphic novel, I think, is important. Like, I'm so glad that I've written out my entire book, or at least having it really outlined. Because one thing I found, even after I'd got it written and I was converting it to a graphic novel, when I got to the end of the graphic novel, I realized I needed to put something in the end, but I also needed to foreshadow that earlier in the story. And if I had just been going along, I couldn't have gone back and done the foreshadowing. Specifically, I'm talking about if I was already releasing it online and just going little by little. Like, honestly, I highly recommend writing out the whole story so that you can make sure that when you put those pieces in, so you have those little bits of foreshadowing that, your readers may not even recognize that it is foreshadowing, and then at the end there's this payoff when they refer back to that thing that they'd mentioned earlier. So what I'm wanting to do with this channel is put myself out there, kind of share my work with you, and share my process as I'm going along. And maybe I'll show as I work on inking stuff. Maybe I'll talk about the things that I've learned. Hopefully, as I go and do this more, these will get a little bit better. It was good talking to y'all. Goodbye. Good day.